The ship came out of faster-than-light travel with a soft hum. Lieutenant Commander Emma Hayes stood at her station and looked through the viewing window at the planet below. It was golden and brown, covered in vast plains and mountain ranges that stretched across entire continents. This was Veraki Prime, home to a species that had made the rest of the galaxy nervous for centuries. Emma was not a diplomat. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life forms. Her job on the horizon's edge was to observe, take notes, and collect samples when possible. She had spent 12 years cataloging strange plants and tiny organisms on dozens of worlds. She was good at her work, and she liked it because it was quiet and simple. Captain Daniel Ortega had brought the ship here on a diplomatic mission. Humanity was still new to the galactic stage, having only made contact with other species about 80 years ago. Most of those species saw humans as curious but harmless. The Veraki were different. They did not see anyone as harmless. The Veraki were warriors. They stood over 8 feet tall and looked something like lions that walked on 2 legs. They had golden fur, sharp claws, and manes that came in different colors depending on their family line. They had conquered 12 star systems through war and ruled them with iron discipline. 3 other species had tried to make peace treaties with them over the past 100 years. All 3 had failed. Emma watched the planet grow larger as the ship descended. She had read everything she could find about the Veraki during the journey. They valued strength, honor, and bloodline above all else. They did not trust outsiders. They did not forgive insults. And they protected their young with a ferocity that bordered on madness. The diplomatic team was made up of 5 trained negotiators led by Ambassador Nathan Cole. He was a tall man with gray hair and a serious face. He had been preparing for this mission for 2 years. Emma was not part of his team. She was there to study the local plant life and stay out of the way. The landing was smooth. The main delegation walked out onto the landing platform where a group of Veraki warriors waited in formation. Emma stayed near the back of the human group, trying to be invisible. The warriors were even bigger than she had imagined. Their eyes were golden and sharp, and they watched the humans the way a cat watches mice. High Chieftain Korath Morvith stood at the center of his people. He was the largest Veraki present, with a dark crimson mane that marked him as royalty. He wore armor made of some dark metal that seemed to absorb light. When he spoke, his voice was so deep that Emma could feel it in her chest. "Welcome to our world, humans," he said. "We will see if you are worth our time." It was not the warmest greeting, but Ambassador Cole smiled and bowed his head respectfully. The formal reception would take place in the Grand Hall of Clan Morvith, the ruling family's ancestral home. The humans were led through wide corridors made of stone and metal. Everything was built on a massive scale, designed for beings much larger than humans. Emma tried to pay attention to the ceremony, but she found her eyes wandering to the architecture and the small details around her. She noticed the carvings on the walls which told stories of ancient battles. She saw the banners hanging from the ceiling, each one representing a different clan. She observed the way the Veraki moved, always aware of their surroundings, always ready for a threat that might never come. After an hour of formal speeches and ritual exchanges of gifts, Emma needed a break. The Grand Hall was crowded and loud, and she felt out of place among the diplomats and warriors. She slipped away through a side door and found herself in an outdoor garden. The garden was beautiful. Strange plants with silver leaves grew in neat rows around a central fountain. The air smelled sweet, like honey and something else she could not name. Emma knelt beside one of the plants and pulled out her scanner. This was what she was good at. This made sense to her. She was so focused on her work that she almost missed the sound. It was soft, like a small animal crying. She turned her head and listened. The sound came again, from behind a row of tall bushes. Emma stood and walked toward the noise. She pushed through the bush and found herself in a smaller garden area, hidden from view. And there, sitting on the ground with tears running down his furry face, was a Veraki cub. He was tiny compared to the adults, maybe 3 feet tall. His fur was pale gold, and his mane had not grown in yet. He looked up at Emma with wide, frightened eyes. He had clearly been crying for some time. Emma's heart broke a little. She had no children of her own, but she had nephews and nieces back on Earth. She knew what a scared child looked like. No matter the species, she did not think about politics. She did not think about the fact that touching a Veraki cub might be a terrible mistake. She simply did what felt natural. She knelt down slowly, making herself as small as possible. She did not reach for the cub. She did not make any sudden movements. She just held out her hand, palm up, and spoke in a soft voice. "Hey there, little one. Are you lost?" The cub sniffled and looked at her hand. He did not understand her words, but he seemed to understand her tone. She was not a threat. She was offering help. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the cub crawled forward and touched her hand with his small paw. His fur was incredibly soft. Emma smiled gently and stayed very still. "It is okay," she said. "I will help you find your family." The cub made a decision. He climbed up her arm with surprising speed and settled on her shoulder, wrapping his small arms around her neck. He buried his face in her hair and continued to cry, but softer now. He felt safe. Emma stood up carefully, one hand supporting the cub's back. She had no idea what to do next. She needed to find someone who could help, someone who knew where this child belonged. She turned toward the main hall. And that was when she saw them. At least 50 Veraki warriors stood at the edge of the garden. They had been watching her. They had seen everything, and they were completely frozen, staring at her with expressions she could not read. Emma's blood went cold. She had made a terrible mistake. She was holding one of their children. They were going to kill her, but no one moved. No one drew a weapon. No one even spoke. One of the warriors, an older female with gray in her mane, slowly walked forward. Her eyes were fixed on the cub sleeping on Emma's shoulder. When she reached Emma, she did not attack. She did not threaten. She just stared. "How did you know?" The female asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Know what?" Emma replied, confused. "The yielding approach. The way you made yourself small. The way you offered your hand and waited. That is how our mothers call to cubs who are not their own. It has not been done by an outsider in 900 years. Emma blinked. "I did not know anything. He was just scared. I wanted to help." The female warrior studied her for a long moment. Then she reached out and very gently took the sleeping cub from Emma's shoulder. The cub whimpered but did not wake. "You must come with me," the female said. "The High Chieftain will want to know about this." Emma followed her back into the Grand Hall. She had no idea that her life and the future of human-Veraki relations had just changed forever. High Chieftain Korath Morvith sat alone in his private chamber. The room was dark except for the glow of a large screen on the wall. He had watched the recording 17 times now. He could not stop watching it. The footage showed the garden. It showed his grandson Thyric lost and crying among the plants. It showed the human female entering the small hidden area. And it showed what happened next. Korath had ruled his clan for 40 years. He had fought in 17 wars. He had lost 3 sons in battle and buried 2 wives. He had faced death more times than he could count, and he had never once shown fear. But watching this small human female with his grandson made something twist inside his chest. The cub was everything to him. Thyric was the son of his youngest daughter, the last hope of his direct bloodline. Veraki did not have many children. Their bodies were strong, but their birth rate was low. A single cub represented the future of an entire family. Losing a cub was worse than losing a war, and yet this stranger, this tiny alien creature with no fur and no claws, had done something that Korath had never seen before. She had made herself small. She had not tried to grab the cub or pick him up by force. She had not shouted or commanded. She had simply knelt down, offered her hand, and waited. She had let Thyric choose. Korath played the footage again. He watched the cub climb up onto the human's shoulder. He watched the female support him with one hand, gentle and careful. He watched Thyric bury his face in her strange hair and stop crying. In 40 years, Korath had seen many things. He had seen warriors die with honor and cowards run from battle. He had seen treaties broken and alliances forged. He had seen species try to steal Viraki cubs for ransom and watch those species burn for their crimes, but he had never seen an outsider treat a cub like a mother would. He touched a button on his chair, and a door opened behind him. An old female entered the room. Her name was Vela, and she was the spirit keeper of Clan Morvith. She was the oldest living Viraki, nearly 300 years old. Her eyes were clouded with age, but her mind was sharp as a blade. "You summoned me, my chieftain," she said. "Watch this," Korath replied. He played the footage one more time. Vela watched in silence. When it ended, she said nothing for a long moment. Then she walked closer to the screen and touched it with one wrinkled hand. "The yielding approach," she said softly. "I have not seen it performed by an outsider in my entire life. The last time it happened was before I was born, in the time of my grandmother's grandmother." "She cannot have known our ways," Korath said. "The humans only contacted us 60 days ago. They know almost nothing about us." "Then she did not know," Vela agreed. "She did it without knowing. Her body understood what her mind did not." Korath stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains. The sky was orange and red, the colors of blood and fire. "What does it mean?" he asked. Vela was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke in a voice that carried the weight of centuries of tradition. "Among our people, cubs are sacred. They see truth that adults cannot see. A cub's instinct is pure, unclouded by politics or fear. When a cub chooses someone, that choice is real. It cannot be faked or forced." She paused and pointed at the frozen image on the screen where Theric clung to the human's shoulder. "Your grandson chose her. He could have run. He could have fought. He could have waited for his own people to find him. Instead, he climbed onto an alien's shoulder and fell asleep. He trusted her completely." "He is only a child," Korath said. "He does not understand." "That is exactly why his choice matters," Vela replied. "Children do not lie. They do not calculate. They simply feel." And he felt safe with her. Korath turned back to face the spirit keeper. His face was hard, but his eyes showed something deeper. "The council will not accept this. They will say it was a trick, a plan by the humans to gain our trust." "Then show them the footage," Vela said. "Let them watch her face. There is no deception there." She did not know she was being watched. She did not know the weight of what she was doing. She simply saw a frightened child and wanted to help. "And if I believe you? What then?" Vela smiled, showing teeth that were still sharp despite her age. "Then you must decide what this means for your people and for hers." The ancestors spoke of moments like this, moments when the universe sends a sign that cannot be ignored. She walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "I have lived 300 years, my chieftain. I have seen many species try to earn our trust. They come with gifts and promises. They come with threats and demands. They come with clever words and hidden plans. None of them have ever thought to simply be kind to a lost child." She left the room, and Korath was alone again. He stood at the window for a long time, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the human fleet waited in orbit. Somewhere in this very building, the human female was probably scared and confused. Not knowing what would happen to her, he thought about his grandson. He thought about the look on Thyric's face when he had climbed onto the human's shoulder. He thought about all the enemies who had tried to use Viraki children as weapons or bargaining tools. Then he thought about the way the human had knelt down and offered her hand. Asking nothing, expecting nothing, just trying to help, Korath made his decision. He called for his guards and gave them a simple order. "Bring the human female to me." Not the diplomats. Not the ambassador. Just her. The guards bowed and left to carry out his command. While he waited, Korath watched the footage one more time. He watched the moment when Theric chose to trust a stranger from another world. He watched the human's face, the gentle smile, the soft eyes. Perhaps, he thought, this was what the ancestors had meant when they spoke of souls recognizing each other across the void. Perhaps some truths were too simple for clever minds to understand. Perhaps kindness really was the rarest treasure in the universe. The door opened, and the guards brought in the human female. She looked small and frightened, standing in his massive chamber surrounded by warriors who could kill her in an instant. But she did not run. She did not beg. She just stood there and met his eyes. "You held my grandson?" Korath said. "Yes," she replied. "He was scared. I did not want him to be alone." Korath studied her for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked every warrior in the room. He bowed his head to her. "I owe you a debt," he said, "that I do not know how to repay." Emma did not sleep that night. She sat in the guest quarters that the Viraki had given her and tried to understand what was happening. The room was huge, built for beings twice her size. The bed could have fit 10 humans. The ceiling was so high she could barely see it in the dim light. Captain Ortega had come to see her after her meeting with the High Chieftain. He had looked confused and worried. "What did you do?" he asked. "I do not know," Emma replied honestly. "I found a lost child. I helped him. That is all." "That is not all," Ortega said. "The Viraki ambassador just told me that every diplomatic protocol has been changed. They do not want to meet with Ambassador Cole anymore. They want to meet with you. That does not make any sense. I am a biologist. I study plants and bacteria. I do not know anything about diplomacy." Ortega shook his head. "It does not matter what you know. It matters what you did. The Viraki have some kind of belief about children being able to see the truth. You passed a test that you did not even know you were taking." After he left, Emma sat alone and thought about the cub. Theric was his name. She had learned that from the old female who had taken him from her shoulder. The boy was the grandson of the High Chieftain, one of the most important children in their entire civilization, and he had chosen to trust her. The next morning, guards came to bring her to the Grand Hall. The room was even more impressive in daylight. Sunlight streamed through massive windows, casting golden patterns on the stone floor. Hundreds of Viraki filled the space. Warriors and nobles and elders from all the major clans. Emma felt very small as she walked down the central aisle. Everyone was watching her. She could feel their eyes on her skin like heat from a fire. High Chieftain Korath sat on a throne at the far end of the hall. He was even more impressive today, dressed in ceremonial armor that gleamed like dark water. His crimson mane was braided with golden threads. Emma stopped at the base of the throne and did not know what to do. Should she bow? Should she kneel? Nobody had told her the proper protocol. She decided to just stand straight and meet his eyes. If she was going to die, she would do it with dignity, but Korath did not look angry. His face was calm, almost thoughtful. He raised one massive hand and the entire hall went silent. "Emma Hayes of Earth," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "you are brought before this assembly to answer for your actions in the Garden of Ancestors." Emma swallowed hard. "I am ready to answer. You entered a sacred space without permission. You touched a child of the royal bloodline. You held him against your body and let him weep into your hair." Korath paused. "These actions under our law carry a penalty of death." The hall was absolutely silent. Emma felt her heart stop beating for a moment. "However," Korath continued, "our law also speaks of exceptions. The yielding approach is an ancient rite older than our current laws. It is the way a clan mother offers protection to a cub not of her blood. To perform this rite is to take responsibility for that child's safety and well-being." He stood from his throne and descended the steps toward her. Each footstep echoed through the hall like thunder. "You did not know our customs. You did not know our laws. You did not know that performing the yielding approach would bind you to my grandson in the eyes of our ancestors." He stopped directly in front of her. Up close, he was terrifying. His teeth were longer than her fingers. His claws could cut through steel. And yet his eyes were not cruel. They were searching, questioning, "Why did you do it?" He asked quietly, so only she could hear. "Because he was scared," Emma said. "Because no child should cry alone. Because it was the right thing to do." Korath studied her face for a long moment. Then he turned back to the assembly. "I have consulted with the Spirit Keeper. I have watched the recordings. I have spoken with those who witnessed the event. And I have reached my decision. He raised his hand again. Emma Hayes performed the yielding approach without knowledge or intent. This means her soul already carried the understanding that her mind did not possess. Such a thing has not happened in 900 years. The ancestors called this a sign of true spirit, a soul that recognizes duty without being taught. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some of the Varaki looked shocked. Others looked angry. But most looked curious, watching to see what would happen next. Korath reached into his armor and pulled out a small pendant made of dark metal. It was shaped like a claw, with strange symbols carved into its surface. By my authority as High Chieftain, I name Emma Hayes as clan mother to her people within Varaki space. She will speak for the humans. Her word will be law. Her protection will extend to all who travel under her banner. He placed the pendant around Emma's neck. It was heavier than it looked. Any who harm her or her people harm the bloodline of Morvith itself. The punishment for such crimes is extinction. Emma stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. She had come here as a scientist, a nobody, a person who studied moss. Now she was apparently some kind of diplomatic leader with the power of an entire warrior clan behind her. I do not know what to say, she managed. Korath's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Then say nothing. Actions speak louder than words among my people. You have already proven yourself with deeds. The rest will follow. He turned to address the assembly one final time. Send word to all clans. Send word to all systems. The humans have earned our respect. Their clan mother has shown the soul of a Varaki. We will treat with them as equals. The hall erupted in sound. Some voices cheered. Some growled. But none openly opposed their chieftaindom as Emma was led away by a group of honor guards. She passed by a small figure standing near the throne. It was Thyric, the cub she had held in the garden. He looked up at her with bright golden eyes. Will you come back? He asked in halting, broken English. Emma knelt down, just as she had in the garden. I will come back, she promised. I will always come back. Thyric reached out and touched the pendant hanging around her neck. Then he smiled, showing tiny teeth that would one day grow into weapons. Good, he said. You are family now. Emma did not know exactly what that meant. But she knew that her life would never be the same again. Behind her, the diplomats and politicians were scrambling to understand what had happened. Ambassador Cole was furious, demanding explanations. Captain Ortega was trying to calm everyone down, but Emma did not care about any of that. She was looking at a small cub who had decided to trust her, and thinking about how strange it was that the biggest changes in history often came from the smallest moments of kindness. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within 3 days, every major species had heard the story. A human xenobiologist had done what armies of diplomats had failed to do for a century. She had earned the trust of the Varaki. Emma found herself at the center of attention she had never wanted. Reporters from a dozen worlds requested interviews. Ambassadors from species she had never heard of sent formal greetings. The Consortium of Allied Worlds, a political body that had been trying to establish trade routes through Varaki space for 50 years, suddenly wanted to talk to humanity about partnership opportunities, all because she had comforted a crying child. Ambassador Nathan Cole was not happy. He had spent 2 years preparing for this mission. He had studied Varaki culture, learned their language, memorized their customs. He had expected to be the one who made history. Instead, he had been replaced by a woman who studied mushrooms for a living. This is ridiculous, he told Captain Ortega during an emergency meeting aboard the Horizon's Edge. She has no training. She has no experience. She does not even know the basic protocols for interstellar negotiation. The Varaki do not care about protocols, Ortega replied. They care about character. And apparently her character passed their test. It was luck. Pure luck. She stumbled into a situation and got lucky. Maybe so. But that luck has opened doors that have been closed for 100 years. We would be fools to throw it away. Cole stormed out of the meeting, but there was nothing he could do. The Viraki had made their position clear. They would deal with Emma Hayes or they would deal with no one. Emma tried her best to learn quickly. She spent her nights reading everything she could find about diplomacy, trade agreements, and interstellar law. She spent her days meeting with Viraki officials, listening more than talking, trying to understand what they wanted and what humanity could offer. The old spirit keeper Vela became her teacher. She visited Emma's quarters every evening and explained the deep traditions that governed Viraki society. "We are warriors," Vela said one night, "but we are not mindless killers. Every war we have fought was for survival. Every enemy we have crushed threatened our children first. We do not start conflicts. We end them. Then why does the galaxy fear you so much?" Emma asked. "Because we do not forgive. When someone threatens our young, we do not negotiate. We do not accept apologies. We erase the threat completely so it can never return." Vela poured a cup of hot liquid that smelled like cinnamon and smoke. She handed it to Emma. "3 species have been destroyed because they tried to take Viraki cubs. The Chilaxan took 1 cub 300 years ago. We hunted them across 4 systems and burned their homeworld to glass. They still exist, but they will never recover. That is why the galaxy fears us." Emma sipped the drink. It was bitter but not unpleasant. "And yet you accepted me," she said. "Even though I touched one of your children. You did not take. You gave. That is the difference between an enemy and a friend." Young Thyric visited Emma every day. He brought her small gifts like shiny stones he found in the garden, dried meat from the kitchen, drawings he made with colored wax. He was learning English from a translation device, and he practiced by telling Emma about his day. "I fought my cousin today," he said proudly one afternoon. "I won. Were you supposed to be fighting?" Emma asked. "Yes, it is training. All cubs must learn to fight." He showed her a small bruise on his arm. "He hit me here, but I hit him harder." Emma smiled and shook her head. "On Earth, children usually play games that do not involve hitting each other." Thyric looked confused. "Then how do they learn to be strong?" "There are different kinds of strength," Emma said. "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not fight at all." The cub thought about this for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "That is what you did," he said. "In the garden, you did not fight. You just helped. And now everyone respects you? I suppose that is true. My grandfather says you have the soul of a warrior without the body of one. He says that is very rare." Emma did not know how to respond to that. She was just a scientist who liked quiet work and peaceful days. The idea of being called a warrior felt strange, but she was beginning to understand that the Viraki had a different definition of the word. The first real test came 3 weeks later. A delegation from the Chilaxan hierarchy arrived unannounced, demanding to speak with the humans. The Chilaxan were the species that the Viraki had nearly destroyed 3 centuries ago. They had been in a cold war ever since, neither side willing to make the first move toward peace. High Chieftain Korath was furious. He wanted to send the Chilaxan away, but Emma asked to meet with them first. Why? Korath demanded. "They are our enemies. They would destroy us if they could." "Maybe," Emma said. "Or maybe they are tired of being afraid. Sometimes enemies become friends when someone gives them a chance." Korath stared at her for a long moment. Then he made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You are either very wise or very foolish," he said. "I cannot decide which." "Neither can I," Emma admitted. The meeting with the Chilaxan took place in a neutral area of the Grand Hall. Emma sat at a table across from their lead negotiator, a tall gray being with 4 arms and eyes like black glass. "We have heard of you," the Chilaxan said. "The human who tamed the beasts." "I did not tame anyone," Emma replied calmly. "I made friends." "There is a difference. Friends with the Viraki? They do not have friends. They have servants and corpses." Emma leaned forward slightly. "Then perhaps you do not know them as well as you think. They are capable of great kindness when they trust someone. The problem is that trust must be earned through actions, not words. The Chilaxan was silent for a moment. Then he asked, "What did you do to earn it?" Emma told him the truth. She told him about the garden, the lost cub, the way she had simply offered help without thinking about politics or consequences. When she finished, the Chilaxan negotiator looked at her with something like wonder. "You did all of this by being kind to a child?" "Yes, and now you have more power in Viraki space than any outsider in 900 years. I suppose so." The Chilaxan leaned back, his four hands folded together in a gesture that might have been thoughtfulness. "Perhaps we have been approaching this wrong," he said slowly. "For 300 years we have tried to match their strength with our own. We have built weapons, formed alliances, prepared for war. And all of it has accomplished nothing." "What would you like to accomplish?" Emma asked. "Peace," the Chilaxan said. "Real peace. My people are tired of being afraid." Emma nodded. "Then let me help you find it." That meeting was the beginning of something new. Within months, Emma was mediating disputes between species that had been enemies for centuries. She had no special training, no fancy degrees in diplomacy. She just listened, asked questions, and tried to find solutions that worked for everyone. The galaxy was starting to change. And it had all begun with a crying child and a woman who stopped to help. 5 years had passed since the day in the garden. Emma stood on a balcony high above the city of Morvith, watching the sun rise over the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and gold, the same colors as Viraki fur. She had learned to love these sunrises. They reminded her that even on alien worlds, some things were beautiful in ways that needed no translation. Behind her, in the massive chamber that served as her office, aides from 3 different species were preparing documents for the day's ceremony. The Treaty of Morvith would be signed in a few hours, the result of years of careful negotiation and hundreds of difficult meetings. She was no longer the frightened scientist who had wandered into a garden looking for interesting plants. She was the voice of humanity to the Viraki clans, a title that had never existed before and would probably never be held by anyone else in the same way. The door opened, and a young Viraki entered. He was tall now, almost 6 feet, with a bronze mane that was just beginning to grow thick. His golden eyes were bright with intelligence and curiosity. "Good morning, Thyric," Emma said without turning around. "How did you know it was me?" "You always knock twice and then wait exactly 3 seconds before opening the door. You have done it the same way since you were 4 years old." Thyric laughed and came to stand beside her on the balcony. He was only 8, but Viraki children matured faster than humans. In another few years he would begin his warrior training in earnest. "Are you nervous about today?" he asked. "A little," Emma admitted. "This treaty changes everything. It opens Viraki space to human exploration. It creates defense agreements that will reshape galactic politics. It establishes the first cultural exchange program between our peoples." She paused. "That is a lot of responsibility." "You will do well," Thyric said with complete confidence. "You always do." He reached into a pouch at his belt and pulled out a small polished stone. It was deep blue with veins of silver running through it. "I found this yesterday," he said, "in the northern mountains. It is beautiful, yes?" Emma took the stone and turned it over in her hands. It was smooth and heavy, perfectly shaped by millennia of wind and water. "It is beautiful," she agreed. "Thank you. I have given you many stones over the years," Thyric said. "Grandfather says I will run out of mountains eventually." Emma laughed. "Then we will have to find new mountains." The signing ceremony took place in the Grand Hall, the same room where Emma had been named clan mother 5 years ago. But today it looked different. Banners from 12 species hung from the ceiling alongside the traditional Viraki clan flags. Delegates from across the galaxy filled the massive space. High Chieftain Korath sat on his throne, older now but no less impressive. His crimson mane had threads of gray, and there were new scars on his hands from battles Emma did not know about. But his eyes were still sharp, still watching everything. Captain Daniel Ortega was there, promoted to admiral now and commanding the entire human fleet in this sector. Ambassador Nathan Cole had retired 2 years ago, finally accepting that his traditional methods would never have worked with the Viraki. Other faces had come and gone, but Emma had remained. She walked to the center of the hall and faced the assembled delegates. Behind her stood representatives from both humanity and the Viraki. Beside her stood Thuric, allowed to attend as a witness because of his special connection to the events that had started everything. 5 years ago, Emma began, I came to this world as a scientist. I had no plans to change history. I had no desire to become a diplomat. I just wanted to study plants and do my job. She paused and looked around the room. But life rarely follows our plans. I found a lost child in a garden. I did not know his language. I did not know his customs. I did not know that helping him would change everything. I just knew that he was scared and alone and that no child should have to feel that way. High Chieftain Korath stood from his throne and descended to stand beside her. The hall went absolutely silent. Many species have asked me how humans earned our trust, Korath said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. They believe there must be secret intelligence, superior tactics, or hidden leverage. They cannot accept that the answer is simple. He turned to look at Emma. Humans sent us someone who, when she saw a frightened child, forgot about politics and simply offered help. That is why we trust them. Not because they are strong, not because they are clever. We trust them because when it mattered most, they were kind without being asked. Emma felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them away and focused on the task at hand. The treaty documents were brought forward on a ceremonial table. Emma signed first, her hand steady despite the weight of the moment. Korath signed second, using a claw dipped in traditional ink. Then, one by one, representatives from both species added their marks. It was done. The Treaty of Morvith was official. The celebration lasted for hours. There was food and music and speeches that went on too long. Emma smiled and shook hands and accepted congratulations from beings she had never met, but eventually she slipped away, as she always did. She found a quiet corner of the garden, the same garden where everything had begun. She sat on a stone bench and looked up at the stars. Admiral Ortega found her there sometime later. He sat beside her and said nothing for a while. You know, he finally said, when I first brought you on this mission, I thought the best outcome would be some cultural notes and maybe a few biological samples. Life rarely follows our plans, Emma said, repeating the words she had used in her speech. No, it does not. Ortega looked at her with something like wonder. For what it is worth, I think humanity got lucky. We sent scientists and diplomats, but what the Viraki needed was someone who remembered that a scared child is just a scared child, no matter the species. That is not luck, Emma said quietly. That is just being human. A small figure appeared at the edge of the garden. Thuric walked toward them, still carrying the ceremonial robes he had worn during the signing. He looked tired but happy. Emma, he said, some human children arrived with one of the diplomatic ships. They want to see the garden. Will you show them? Emma stood and brushed off her clothes. Of course. She walked with Thuric toward the main building. Along the way, they passed a group of Viraki cubs playing in a courtyard. They were chasing each other, growling and laughing, their small claws scratching against the stone, and among them, running and laughing just as loudly, were 3 human children from one of the crew families stationed on Viraki Prime. Emma stopped and watched them play. A Viraki cub tackled a human boy, and they rolled across the ground together. Instead of crying or fighting, they both burst out laughing and got up to do it again. Look at that, she said softly. What? Thuric asked. The future. She watched a moment longer, then continued walking. Behind her, the children kept playing, unaware that they were the first generation to grow up without the shadow of fear and suspicion that had separated their peoples for so long. The galaxy had changed. It had changed because a woman stopped to help a crying child. It had changed because kindness, real kindness, was rarer and more valuable than any weapon or technology. Humanity had many strengths. They were adaptable. They were stubborn. They refused to give up even when the odds were against them. But their greatest weapon had never been their ships or their soldiers. Their greatest weapon was their persistent, inexplicable tendency to care about others even when no one expected them to, and somewhere in the universe, other species were learning that lesson. The age of fear was ending. The age of compassion had begun.